There aren't too many five-star high school football players walking around, but for the few that are out there, many of them seem to be making their way to Athens, Georgia in recent days. We got Savannah Lee Richardson in from Bulldog Illustrated to break down the Sugar Bowl, but we've got weeks and weeks until the boys head to New Orleans so we can talk matchups with Texas later. We're going to focus on recruiting with some big news, Savannah, in that battle for the #1 spot in the nation off the field.
Oh, yeah. Georgia just picked up five-star offensive center, offensive guard, however you want to really put him into the mix of things, from the state of Alabama. He was the #1. His name's Clay Webb. Sorry. I need to mention his name before just going off onto him. But Clay Webb announced this morning around 11, 12 o'clock that he'd be spending the next 3 to 4 years at the University of Georgia, which is a huge, huge deal. Back in probably February or March, at that point in time, granted it was early for the 2019 class, nobody gave Georgia a chance. He was an Alabama kid. He was an Alabama lock. And 8 months, 9 months later, here we are, 9 days out from that early National Signing Day with him picking Georgia and picking to come to Athens for the next 3 to 4 years. I actually put him in my predicted class back on April 1st. And so I like to claim that I was the first Georgia quote-unquote expert that does recruiting to pick him for the class. So this is kind of my little finally I picked the right guy kind of moment, but super proud that he is coming to Georgia. It's so awesome to see Sam Pittman pulling in five-star guys like he is left and right. And I don't think Georgia's done in regards to five-star offensive linemen.
Savannah Lee Richardson talking up the Bulldogs as they head to New Orleans to take on Texas in a few weeks. But first and foremost is, of course, the early signing day coming up on December 19th. So, Savannah, we know that last year was kind of the experiment. Many of us didn't know what to expect out of the early signing period, and it was proven that about 80% for the big power programs and even the Power 5 in total, about 80% were locked it down because players wanted to know where they were going. And, of course, those coaches wanted to have a good grasp on what their class was going to look like, and it should be about the same this year. So if you can kind of give us just an overview of Georgia's class, wherever you want to take this in regards to who you really like, who may be not necessarily a five-star, but really jumps out to you.
So Georgia has another opportunity to get at least a top 3 class in the country, if not going back and taking over Alabama's #1 spot in the spot 2 years in a row, which is something that hasn't happened since Nick Saban probably took over for Alabama, which is incredible because Kirby Smart's saying, if anything you can do, I can do better almost, especially in the last 2 years. The only thing is like losing in the SEC championship and a national championship. But anyway, we won't go there. Georgia is likely going to take 2 quarterbacks if they can get the certain quarterback that they want. Dylan Gabriel, who is a lower end guy from the state of Hawaii, who's actually a left-handed quarterback, recently came for an official visit this past weekend and absolutely had a ball. Loves it. Like all the sources and everything that I've read so far, he didn't take a smile off of his face all weekend. Georgia's probably also going to end up taking 2 running backs. They currently have Kenny McIntosh, who is the #10 running back in the country according to 247. And people were actually kind of disappointed when Georgia picked him up because we're used to having 5-star running backs. Well, don't fret, Georgia fans. There are 2 more 5-star running backs out in the mix that Georgia's probably either top 3 or at least neck and neck with whoever else is going up against. And that's Noah Cain and Trey Sanders, 2 5-star running backs from IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida. Trey Sanders was actually on campus this past weekend for his official visit. And since then, it has been nothing but Georgia trending his way. This morning, he had been tweeting with one of Georgia's already committed guys, Nolan Smith, talking about, is there any more room in this class for me? Doing a little Twitter trolling, but I dig it. It's a good sign for the program. Jaden Hazelwood is someone else who decommitted back in October, but actually could end up rejoining the class. However, it'll be the offensive line that could really change up and shape up to be probably one of the best offensive classes taken by Georgia in recent years. And yeah, that's even with the whole Cade Mays, Isaiah Wilson, and all the recent guys that Kirby Smart and Sam Pittman have gotten in the last 2 years. Darnell Wright, who is in the top 10, I believe, in the country, and he's one of the top offensive tackles from the state of West Virginia. He actually is coming for an OV this weekend, coming up weekend. So the last weekend before early national signing day, Georgia's getting him. Don't know exactly when he will be announcing, but I think it's going to be more of a February decision. So like you said, the 80% class that will be filled, he'll be one of those guys that Georgia's holding one of those 2 or 3 spots that'll likely be left out there. Another guy that from the offensive line that was on campus this past weekend was Neal. He's a 5-star from IMG as well. Georgia really has never been into the mix of things, so it was a really surprise that the Bulldogs got him on campus this past weekend with Trey Sanders and Nolan and all of them. And so he seems to like it, but that actually will probably end up being an Alabama and Miami battle there. But you never know. I mean, you don't ever count out Sam Pittman for sure. And then as for the defensive line, Nolan Smith and Travon Walker both this morning came out and shut their recruitment down and said that they're staying with Georgia, signing with Georgia, and is a done deal. However, going back to the guy or you said somebody that's standing out to me that I think Georgia really needs in this class, not necessarily a 4 or 5-star, but he is a 5-star. And that is inside linebacker Nakobe Dean from Horn Lake, Mississippi. That kid is, I'd hate to counter him as another Roquan Smith, but if you go and watch his film, his instinct and his natural ability to just see the field and overall talent-wise, looking at it, he looks like a mini Roquan. But he's actually probably, I think, an inch taller than Roquan and about 210, 215 pounds right now. So with a good strength program, that kid's going to blow up in college. He's exciting. He's going to announce on December 19th, and that's going to be a Georgia-Alabama fight there as well. Finally, in the defensive back area, Georgia has 1 commitment, right, or 2 commitments right now with DJ Daniel and Lewis Seen. Both guys are early enrollees, but Georgia probably will end up taking 2 to 3 more, maybe, depending on how the other positions counteract. Tyreke Stephenson is a 4-star defensive back from South Florida, and he's been trending between us and Miami. I actually think that Georgia could get him on or an in-home visit here shortly, if not trying to get him on campus before those early signing period starts. I think he'll end up with Georgia. And then there's a guy called Kiar Alam. If I messed up his pronunciation, I'm sorry. But he's another guy to keep an eye out for. And then we all know how Kirby Smart likes to flip guys from other programs the last 2 seasons with Quay Walker and a couple other guys. But Nick Kross, who is currently a 4-star or 5-star, depending on whichever. No, he's a 4-star on all of them. I keep looking at all of them on different sites like Rivals and 247, trying to keep up with everything, and so the numbers kind of mix. But he's currently committed to FSU. He actually was on campus for Georgia the Thursday before the Auburn game, and so it was really interesting to see him on campus this late in the season with him being like, "Oh, I'm committed to FSU." So he could be the one that could flip. But yeah, it's really like up and down right now with Georgia, not necessarily more down, but it's kind of like, well, we're talking about this guy, but then this guy's going to also be in the mix of things. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how things play out on December 19th, because Georgia's got only 6 or 7 spots left with the latest edition in Webb. So it's going to be tight numbers for sure.
So I'm not surprised, but I'm astounded in looking at 19 hard commits that 15 out of the 19 are ranked in the top 10 at their position. And certainly if you don't follow recruiting, believe me that if you are not ranked in the top 10 at your position, that doesn't mean you're not going to turn out to be an impact player at the next level. So they certainly have other guys that are ranked 15th at their position. That doesn't mean that they can't play. They are exceptional players too. It all comes down to obviously development and potential for a lot of these guys. I was looking at the states breakdown as well and see that obviously Georgia is the most prominent with 7 of the 19, and basically the states that you would expect most of these players to come from, Florida, Tennessee as well. The Rhode Island selection, he caught my attention just because Rhode Island doesn't play much high school football in regards to elite level high school football. But this kid, Xavier Truss, he is the 15th rated offensive tackle in the nation. So again, he's a top 150 player in the nation, regardless of position. So he's elite as well. And he's the number 1 player, as you would think, out of the state of Rhode Island. And he just comes to mind because I know that he was an early Ohio State commit that Kirby Smart flipped over to the Dogs. But man, if you run down from the top, You've got Nolan Smith, the number 1 weak side defensive end. Clay Webb, the number 1 center. You've got Trevor Walker, the number 2 defensive tackle. Dominic Blaylock is the number 6 wide receiver. Lewis Cain, the number 3 safety out of Texas.
It's
and Reen Davis, and so forth and so on. They're all over the place.
It's Lewis Seen.
Lewis Seen.
We've seen him.
You've seen him and you got him.
Yep. That was a big one too, in my opinion. He's a tall guy. I think he's 6'1", 6'2", maybe.
6'2".
6'2", 190 safety from Texas, but he's actually originally from Massachusetts. He moved down to the school in Texas to play for with Deion Sanders' 2 kids. The team that he's on, Deion Sanders is a big impact, and so that's his story there. But I like that kid. He's really aggressive.
All right, Savannah, we need to have you on here more often talking recruiting, because people love recruiting and can't get enough, and I certainly can't keep track of it. But you're locked in on Georgia, that's for sure.